Welcome back to the Sick and Successful podcast. This is your host, Natalie. We have a phenomenal guest with us today. Her name is Beth Ruffin. Beth is the CEO of the Everyday Inclusionist, which is a boutique consulting firm focused on helping leaders learn how to be more inclusive. She has fibromyalgia, but that did not stop her from becoming a successful business owner. She's very passionate about inclusion because she has been exposed to different races, ethnicities, sexual orientations, and socioeconomical classes as a child in her hometown, Abington, Pennsylvania. She is an author, a TEDx speaker. In 2019, she left corporate America and started her own consulting firm, wrote 2 books, and started a podcast, You Belong Here, with Beth Ruffin. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. Full disclosure, everyone. We just recorded like 10 minutes of this podcast when I found out I was not recording, and I'm heartbroken because the conversation was so good, but we're going to try to have it for you again. Okay. So my question for Beth was, the word fibromyalgia seems to be a word that a lot of people know and a lot of people have heard of, but really, what is fibromyalgia? I don't think many of us know. I have a close friend who has that diagnosis, but to be honest, like other than knowing that it's a term for an illness that people don't really know what the illness is, like that's all I know. So if you'd elaborate for us a little bit more and kind of let us know how it affects you.
Absolutely. And you're not alone. And I think there is so much confusion around fibromyalgia because it is such a large diagnosis.
Yeah.
Right. So fibromyalgia is a chronic illness, right? That has no cure. And the hallmarks of it are chronic fatigue and chronic pain. Now, the thing with fibromyalgia is that it affects every bodily system that we have. Reproductive, nervous, right? Circulatory, all of those things. And so if you were to look at the list of possible symptoms of fibromyalgia, it would probably be 10 pages long. Research comes out every now and again with why they think it was caused, right? My personal diagnosis happened after a tragic event. So I had a tragic event. The next day I got shingles. And then I started having, in my 30s, I was like, who has shingles in their 30s?
Right? A few months ago, just had them.
Oh no. So right?
I know.
And then after that is when the symptoms started. And it took me 3 years to be diagnosed. So I was going to the rheumatologist. He's testing me for lupus and MS and everything.
Yeah.
And that's something to know too, is that fibromyalgia is typically an exclusion diagnosis where they have to exclude everything else and then come to that. I had to go to the Mayo Clinic to get diagnosed because they couldn't do anything locally. But the way it affects me is that I am tired and I am in pain every single moment of every day.
You mentioned when we weren't recording that sometimes someone touches you or can touch you lightly and it can feel like a punch because your nerves are misfiring, and that I can't even imagine that. So how do you manage having such, an extensive diagnosis, such a kind of crazy chronic illness, and being so successful, like a TEDx speaker, a 2-time author, working with some amazing corporations?
Yeah. So the first thing is I had to learn about my diagnosis and I had to learn about myself. So I have to be really in tune with my body. And I have to be able to listen to my body, which is really important because I'm an overachiever. I'm a type A, I'm a Capricorn, right? All those stereotypes about those things are true about me.
I think most of our listeners can relate.
Okay, awesome. So you know where I'm at.
Absolutely.
But some days I may be only able to work 2 hours. Some days that brain fog is going to be so intense that I can't even get anything done.
Yeah.
And so the first I would say is I had to learn about my diagnosis and learn about myself. The second is the professional help. So therapy is amazing. Medications are amazing to help keep my brain regulated. And then I think the third is knowing how to set boundaries for myself and for others. And so, when I'm working with people, I'm very open about, hey, I have this chronic illness. And this affects me in these certain ways. And so this is important for you to know as you're working with me.
That's so beautiful. I don't think a lot of people do that. The whole podcast name is Sick and Successful. So a lot of people, they would have no idea, like on a day-to-day basis, when they're in the corporate world or in the business world, anywhere, working with, really successful business owners, business owners, like we're both CEOs. But the brain fog and the things like just what happened to me with that, like the words, right? That used to never happen. But as diagnoses progress or medications or whatever, you can't fire at the 10, 12, 13, 14-hour days at max capacity as an overachiever.
Right.
So it can feel like a grieving process of the old you prior to diagnosis, or even, I mean, I've been diagnosed since I was 18, but it continuously changes. And it feels like, we mentioned this a little bit when we weren't recording, but grief, like grieving someone or something, but grief that never gets to go away, grief that never has some type of closure or feels like far in the distance in the past, because it's with you every day.
That's right.
And I always say we're a different breed.
Yeah.
People who are sick and successful, we're a different breed. But I really love how you say that you forewarn, per se, people that you're working with. So tell me how that would look if maybe you got a corporate client that you're introducing and starting to work with. How would you start that conversation?
So I let them know about work hours. Right? These are the specific work hours. I also, give me 48 hours, 24 to 48 hours to return your email. And that gives me a buffer, right? Yeah. So that if I can't, I take off Fridays. Absolutely. And that's because I recently found out, I guess we can add this to the list of things. I'm allergic to like everything that's not food. And I didn't know. So like all trees, all mold, all animals. So I get 3 allergy shots every Friday. Well, I can't do anything after that. Right. And so I'm very upfront about my schedule. And I'm very upfront about, hey, here are the ways that I may need some support. Sometimes, I may not have the answer for you right now because my brain is not working the right way, but I will get it back to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a good way kind of to preface it, is in making sure that your boundaries are in place for yourself. And you understand, like you said, you understand your diagnosis before you try to get people to follow them. And I see a pattern with a lot of the people I have on the podcast is most of us have Fridays off, which is really interesting, because it's not that we're not working always, sometimes maybe, but having that day where there's nothing there. So if on a Tuesday, there's no way that you can get on a podcast or get on a whatever, you have that buffer of, there's nothing booked on that day, and you can shuffle things around, flexibility. Whereas when you're working a 9 to 5, or you're working for someone that you either call in sick or you don't, and we get to create our schedules, which is so beautiful about what we do.
But I will say, with pre-COVID, when I was working for a corporation, I worked from home. And I was very honest and said, you're going to get more out of me because I don't have to expend that energy to get all dressed up and drive into the office. And so you're going to get. That's true.
I did the same thing when I was in corporate. I worked from home for a really long time for the exact same reason, and would go see clients when needed. But and get dressed up and whatever, because it takes it. People don't realize, but the whole spoon theory, right? It takes 5 spoons for us to get out of the house, where it takes 0.0 for a quote unquote regular person. So,
right. Like the number of times that I take a shower and then I have to sit on the bed for like 10 minutes.
I can't shower unless it's before bedtime. Like that is, I'm not doing that during the day. Yeah. Unless it's a Friday where I'm not working, I'm just chilling and watching Netflix. It's one of those Fridays, then okay, fine. I love it. I love it. Let's talk a little bit more about what you do for like in your company, because I think it's so important, and we've never had someone like you on the podcast. So tell me all the things I need to know.
So my mission in life is to make our world more inclusive. And there are 2 parts to that. So I teach organizational leaders how to include others. And that looks like going into an organization, maybe doing some executive coaching, maybe doing some strategy work or training, doing organizational assessments to help them see where the gaps are. And then the other part of that is teaching people how to include themselves. And that's really a missing piece, because the message that you typically hear is, hey, you need to include others. You need to make sure that they have a seat at the table. But what that does is it still puts all the power in the hands of other people.
Right.
So what if, while a leader is saying, hey, Natalie, I want to include you, right? Then you, Natalie, are also saying, that's great. And here's what I need to be included. Here are the ways that I need to be engaged, right? Here's the ways that I show up and I want to be engaged with. So this has now become a collaborative process between the one who is including others and the one who is including themselves. And it really makes for just a beautiful, I think, environment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. And you see it so much where companies are inclusive, but then you have someone like you and I who have to work from home. I could not work from an office. I could make myself, but I would have accidents and issues and whatever. So, but they, they may say it's okay, but then you have the little bit lower management giving you grief, your coworkers get, so it's really not inclusive. I've been in that position more than once. What would you say is the thing you see most that corporations need to work on or fix when you come in and it's like a common denominator?
They need to listen to the voice of the people. So, and some companies maybe aren't even asking for the voice. So a lot of, so I will say to people, okay, how do you know how to include your employees? And they're like, and I'm like, you ask them, right? Because we may have a lot of ideas of, oh, this would be so great if we do X, Y, Z. And we've not even taken the time to listen to our staff, listen to our people and say, what is it that you need?
Yeah.
How can I support you? What is it that you want? How will you best thrive?
Right.
And then implementing and acting based upon that feedback.
Yeah. What would you say is something that employers can do to get those responses? Because I know a lot of the times, they ask or there's different ways. Even me as an owner of a company, I've asked, but to have real and honest feedback sometimes is scary to give that to upper management or to your CEO or whatever. So what's a good way for it to be safe for the employees?
Yeah. Partner with an external organization, an external consultant like myself.
Yeah.
Because what I do when I come into organizations is I'm going to do those engagement surveys or focus groups, and I keep the data anonymous and I just aggregate it for summary, right? So I'm like, hey, these are the themes that I'm seeing, but the organization has no idea who said what, where the specific information came from. And that seems to put employees more at ease. Now, there are going to be some people who will never feel comfortable giving feedback.
Yeah.
But I think if you are partnering with someone and you have processes in place to keep that data anonymous, you're going to get more honest feedback.
That's awesome. I love that so much. Where would you see a area that companies are doing better at when it comes to inclusion? Is there one?
Yeah, I mean, I think organizations are getting better at talking about the work that they want to do, talking about the mission, talking about the importance. So I think, 10 years ago, we didn't hear a lot of organizations that even had a diversity statement or even said we want to have an inclusive work environment.
Right.
And so I think a lot of organizations are now like, yes, we've made the commitment. They're really strong to making the commitment. Now I think the next step is let's put this in action.
Right. That's actually, let's follow through. What about smaller companies? So I feel like a lot of our conversation is more for the corporate, the bigger corporation. What about your entrepreneur who has, 2 to 10 employees? What can they do?
So this is going to sound contradictory, but hear me out. I am a really big fan of consistency, right? Now, yes, understanding that everyone has a specific need, that everyone has a specific journey. But think about the ways that you can be consistent in your approaches so that you're not biased. So for example, when you're doing an interview process, are you giving everyone the same questions? Are you rating everyone the same way? Or are you going based on a feeling? right?
Yep.
When you're thinking about promotions of your people, is that based on a specific set of, qualifications or qualities that you want to see, right? Are you having regular meetings consistently with all of your people, one-on-ones, so that you know what they need? You're asking them questions. I've seen teams where people, they may be really close with a couple of members of their team, so they'll go out to lunch with those members, and they don't mean any harm. But by not being consistent, now other people feel excluded.
Yeah.
So really, I would say, really think about how are you putting in consistent processes, consistent procedures, so that you can remove bias.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. I'm in the season of hiring right now, and that's the number one thing for me is I have a series of questions with numbers. I am very like spiritual kind of woo-woo. So there is a feeling vibe there, but it's more so after I'm like, okay, here are my top 3, which here, like I have actual data versus, Yeah. Yeah. So that is a really good tip. I would love to know how you got into this world. So how did you go from working in corporate? Maybe what were you doing in corporate? And then how did you go, what made you so passionate? Of course, I know you went through a lot of it in your hometown, but what made you passionate about actually making these changes in companies?
So I was in insurance. So I was in financial services for 20 years. And if you know anything about financial services, it is white male led. It's a very conservative industry. Yeah. And so I did not see a lot of people like me in leadership. I had hard times even growing my own career. I felt I hit a lot of roadblocks. Yeah. And so the company that I was with, was having conversations with HR and said, hey, if we ever decide to do something about this, I would love to be a part. And through that, got a position created and started leading some work and realized like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so after doing that in corporate for a few years, decided to really go off and do it on my own and use that expertise, that 20 years of expertise, as well as the lived experience to help more people.
That's amazing. So what was the journey like getting those first few clients when you were brand new?
So fortunately, I'm an extrovert. And so I had a whole list of contacts. And so I just reached out to people that I knew, colleagues and friends and people that I had come across and said, hey, I started this business. Let me know if you need help or if you know of someone who needs help. And it started that way. And it's been referral based since then. So my personality, I think, definitely helped me. I think also my approach, because there are many ways to do this work. And there is not one way that's right or one way that's wrong. Yeah. But the way that I approach the work is by providing a safe and judgment-free space. Mm. And so I tell people, if you're going to like say something wrong, I would rather you say it with me. Let me gently correct you before you go out into the world so that you don't make that mistake in public. And I think there are people who are drawn to that way of coaching and training.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So maybe you want to, maybe you don't, but is there like a spilling the tea of like some kind of situation where someone said something ridiculous that we can giggle about that's okay to share?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you one thing that I said, maybe.
Yeah, I would love that.
That was ridiculous because I'm always learning too. So I was having a conversation with someone from a large zoo here in the US, and they were a zoologist and a veterinarian. So i.e. they love animals. Yep. And so we're having a conversation about doing DEI work and how big it is. And, they were like, how do you do this? And I asked her a colloquialism from the business world. Well, how do you eat an elephant? And she's confused. She's like, what? And I'm like, one. And as it's coming out of my mouth, one bite at a time. And the look of horror on her face. And I was like, Beth, you just told someone who loves animals. You just talked about eating an animal. So
So essentially we all can do it.
Yes, we laughed about it, and it like she was like, "That's okay," but it has caused me to be a little more
Yeah.
conscious of who I'm talking to,
Right.
right? And thinking through how will this land on this person's
Yeah.
end.
That's such a good way. Like, that's such a good story to put into perspective, right? Because you wouldn't think that that could be, I don't think offensive, but like triggering maybe to someone,
Right.
but you don't know what their values and et cetera is.
Yeah.
So what would be, let's say one of us said something that was, I don't know, politically incorrect or hurt someone else's feelings in the workplace. What's the best way to approach that? Maybe from either side.
Yeah. The key is really relationship building. It's important to have relationships with people because then you can have conversations with them, right? But I'm a fan of, you don't want to embarrass someone. So, taking them to the side and saying, "Hey, you said this, and I don't even know if you're aware, but that can
Mhm.
be offensive.
Right.
Let me tell you why. Maybe here's some suggestions for how you want to approach that." Now, I think there are some situations where you may need to say something in a group of people. So, for example, as you can imagine in insurance, many times I was the only woman in the room, and many times maybe the only person of color in the room.
Yeah.
And so maybe I got talked over or my ideas weren't listened to. There was something going on. And I would leave the room and people would come to me and say, "Oh my God, Beth, I can't believe, that happened to you. That was so wrong." And my thought was, that's great, but I would have loved if you would
Yeah.
have supported me in the room, right?
Right.
Because we have to realize the privilege that we carry and use that
Yep.
privilege for good. And so I think depending on the situation, you can ask yourself, is this something where I kind of need to elevate the issue and throw some support as an ally? Or is this in a situation where I can pull someone to the side and give them some gentle correction?
Yeah. I started in a male dominated industry from the age of 21. So I was 21 years old and a little girl, quote unquote,
Mhm.
in a room full of men. And so the amount of times that it happened to me, and I wish I could go back and, be back in that room and be who I am today and stand up for myself. But it's women like you that are putting out content like this to help others who are in those rooms today to actually make a difference so that it's 2022. Like, we don't need to be excluding people in a corporate, what am I thinking? What's the room? In a boardroom.
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, like
Yeah,
no one should feel excluded when you're in those tables that everyone's around. We should all have a say. And
yeah.
it's to this day, it's still not like that. I know it's not, so
All right.
thank you for the work that you do.
My pleasure.
So tell me a little bit more about your podcast and your books. What are they about?
Yeah.
And yeah.
So I have two books. The first is called Get Up.
Mm.
And it talks about a time when I was going through depression and how I think I had spent 3 days on the couch.
Ah,
And it's a faith-based book, and it's talking kind of about
amazing.
that journey to kind of get through that depression and through that brokenness. And it's funny because I have said recently, like, "Oh, I'm going through some things," and somebody will say, "Get up, go read your book," and I'm like, you know. And then my second book is You Belong Here,
Oh, I
and
love
that's the book about including yourself and self-inclusion.
amazing.
And that is just, again, how do you speak up for yourself? How do you advocate for yourself, right? Because sometimes you may be the only one who's cheering you on, and you've got to build up that muscle, that
Yeah,
strength of speaking up for yourself.
it's so
And
true.
then that goes with the podcast. So the podcast is really giving tips about how can you speak up for yourselves, advocate for yourselves, make choices, negotiate, right? All these things that we wish we would have known
Yeah.
as 21-year-old women, right?
Right. Or women in the workplace in general, and especially disabled women of color, like
Yeah.
you add one extra thing
Yeah,
to it and it's hard. I mean, it's just layers on layers of being excluded.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And it's a lot of it isn't like, I mean, it can be in the face. A lot of what I experienced was passive aggressive, was hearing rumors later down the road, or, because of my Crohn's disease, I always had more of a round stomach. And I got to a point where it was quite bad because of a medication I was on. And there were rumors going around that I was pregnant and that I was leaving this day and that day. And it's like, oh, the amount of stress. And if only every corporation could have someone like you in there, kind of just like
Helping. Yeah.
yeah, mediating it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard, I recall a time I had a handicap license on my car just because my
Yeah.
body was going through it. And the amount of people who were like, why do you have a license? Why do you have handicap? Or the amount of ugly stares I got, and
Yep.
even, when applying for jobs, well, can you do you think you can keep up with the rigor of this role? And like you said, microaggressions, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
are not necessarily in your face, like, calling you an expletive, but they
It's
hurt.
almost worse. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
they
almost
hurt.
worse. Yeah. Because you sit on it and you're like, just mull it over versus being able to say something back. Our brains don't work that fast.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. How many times I'm like, oh man,
Right?
I should have said this.
If only I could have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And tell me about your TEDx experience. How was that? And how did you come across that opportunity? And how has it been since? Has it
Oh,
changed your business for you?
recently it has. So I've wanted to do a TEDx forever, right? It's one of my
Me too.
goals. Yes.
On the vision board.
I worked with a coach actually who
Amazing.
has done talks and organized talks.
Wow.
And she helped me apply. And so got this opportunity last year to do a TED talk. And I talked about how to include yourself. And I embarrassed myself by dancing on stage. But it was a good experience.
Yeah.
I want to do more. So I kind of got that first one out of the way. And actually just this week, I got my first call from someone who saw the talk and wants to bring me into their company. So like,
Amazing.
yes, let's do it. Thank
Congratulations.
you.
That's so good to hear. And that's a cool thing about content online is it lives forever. Podcasts, talks, all of the above. And you're going to be changing lives for years and years with this podcast or any other ones that you've done a long time ago. So it's really cool.
Thank you.
That's really cool. What would you say to someone who just got diagnosed and is struggling with a chronic illness, but is, a go-getter like you and I and wants to have a successful career?
Get your support system, right? As much as my family and friends love me, they don't know what it's like to feel the way I feel.
Yeah.
And so get people, be part of a community of folks who know what you're going through, because that's so important to be able to vent, to ask questions. I would also say get a good doctor. So for me, one of the fibromyalgia associations, they have a list of good doctors for people with fibro. And I found one here in South Carolina, and she's amazing. Like, she explains things to me. She doesn't judge me. She takes time. And so that helps to uplift me as well, so make sure you have the good medical professional. Advocate for yourself. If you're not getting what you need, you have the right to either demand it or find someone else and then get that support system.
Exactly. And a little tidbit I'll add to that is a lot of the communities for chronic illness can be a little bit of like a downer. So find the people from those communities that can be your, like, in the DMs type of support system that also have the dreams that you do. Because I found I was diagnosed in 2007. So it was a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
I found when I was at my lowest, I would dive into those communities and it would pull me down.
Yeah.
So, a balance between having people who really, really get it and having people who inspire you to reach the stars, to do what you want to do, to dream big, because it is possible. And that's the premise of this podcast, but it's possible to do anything.
Absolutely.
If you want it, that's kind of the, of course there's going to be different ways and limitations, etc., but you can accomplish your dreams if you want them.
That's right. And don't compare yourself, because prime example, Lady Gaga has fibromyalgia. Now, Beth is not going to be able to be swinging off of stuff from the ceiling and doing all that dancing.
Right.
But one may look and say, well, Lady Gaga has fibro and she's able to do X, Y, Z. Understand that the way that your illness affects you is going to be different than everybody else in the world. Don't compare.
Exactly. That's such a good one. Seriously. Don't compare. It doesn't to anything, to anyone. You're your own person and you're the person you should be. If you're that type of person, you should be the person you're, what's it called? You're in competition with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Compete with yourself and no one else. And even then, don't compete with the 21-year-old you.
Oh yeah. Because let me tell you, we went to an amusement park and I was like, oh, I can't ride rides anymore. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Now I know.
Yeah. No, but seriously.
I'm not 21 anymore.
Yep, exactly. Oh my gosh. Getting older and chronic illness and being successful all in one. So Beth, you have the floor. Tell us what you have coming up, where people can find you, if you have any courses or programs or anything they can find you or you have for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to be on Instagram at the Beth Ruffin. It's very simple, but I am actually building a course for inclusive leaders. It's a group coaching program, and we're going to have live coaching calls. We're going to have a community, some, hot seats and things like that. I really want to help people get out of that fear.
Yeah.
I hear so many people say, I don't know what to do. I'm afraid, and it paralyzes them. And I want to help them get out of that fear and really move into action. And so that's an upcoming group coaching program. If you want to, email me or jump in the DMs, I can send you the information for that. But yeah, and the podcast. So I have a soft launch, but I'm going to launch it in October.
Ooh. So is it out on Spotify already? And Apple, all the above?
It is out there, yes, but I haven't done an official launch yet.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. So all of Beth's links will be in the show notes below. You can find her there. You can find her on Instagram. Send her a DM if you are looking for that program. And any last thoughts you'd like to tell the audience, Beth? My
favorite words of all time: you belong here. And you belong here as you are right now, right? Sick, not sick, successful, making your way to successful, right? You belong here before you get that position you want, before you start that business, before your income level, right? You belong here now. And any room that you walk into, you belong there. Don't let anyone tell you differently. So true. Even if you feel uncomfortable, you belong. Yes. Yeah. I love it. I love it. I love it. Go show Beth some love on her social channels. And remember, dream big. It's possible for you. And your next version of success is around the corner.